Aging Insight, empowering you through the aging process.
So today's topic going to be about veteran benefits. We're now, this whole firm started by Lisa and I here in Texarkana. We are currently the largest elder law firm in the Southwest now. And the only firm that I know of that has 7 certified VA attorneys. And a full-time VA paralegal, and that's Lori back there. She's in, I guess she's here to learn. I don't know. You'd think she'd know it by now. But anyway, so we do a lot of stuff with the veterans. In fact, I do a lot of stuff with the veterans. We've got Veterans Day coming up here in a couple of weeks, and every Veterans Day, I typically will take the day off of work and see how much free stuff I can get in one day. If you follow us on Facebook or anything, in the next couple of days, I'll be posting the lists of all of the free stuff that veterans can get. But I can typically start out about 6 a.m. getting me a Grand Slam breakfast for free at Denny's. I'll swing over to Starbucks, get me a free coffee. Right next door is Sports Clips, and they'll do a free haircut. I can usually get over and knock me out a free oil change, possibly even a free car wash. By that point, I've rounded up to lunch, and I believe Texas Roadhouse is doing free lunch for veterans this year. You can typically get some appetizers at On the Border and all kinds of other stuff, and so I'll just basically make a day out of it. Anybody wants to come join me, just let me know. We'll go see how much free stuff we can get all day long. But it's a lot of fun. But it's and in fact, I just got me a T-shirt made, so it's going to be a fun day. If anybody wants to come along, just give me a shout. We'll all roll in together. But anyway, the VA benefits are a big part of our practice. Now, you got a lot of different types of VA benefits, and only part of which that we typically deal with. You've got retirement benefits for people that did their 20 or more or whatever and retired, and they get a pension check and all of that. And that's based on your retirement. And a lot of times when I start talking to people about VA benefits, they'll start shaking their head and they'll say, well, I didn't retire, so I don't get anything. Well, yeah, if you retired, there's a category of benefits, but that's not what I'm talking about. The other category of benefits are the service-connected disability benefits. These are for people who were injured during their service, and because of that injury, they get something. For example, I have never done it, but my hearing loss would probably rate me a 10% service-connected disability rating. And then on top of that, my ears ring like crazy. If we all got really quiet, it sounds like a gong going off in my head pretty much all the time. As long as I keep running my mouth, I don't hear it, which is probably why I have a profession that lets me run my mouth constantly. But that's tinnitus, and if you have tinnitus, that'll typically get you another 10%. And of course, you've got all the other things, the post-traumatic stress. We're starting to see a lot of the Vietnam era that are having the Agent Orange related illnesses that are cropping up now. But all of those are service-connected disability benefits. And those can be great. They're good benefits. But then again, a lot of times when I'm talking to people about veterans benefits, they say, well, yeah, but I wasn't injured during the service either. I didn't retire. I didn't get hurt. I just did my 4 years and got out, or whatever it was. I often say, the 2 best decisions I ever made: joining the Marines, getting out of the Marines. It was rough. All of the guys that I was in with, most of them are retiring or have retired now, and almost every one of them is 100% service-connected disabled. And that's because in 1990 they declared war in the Persian Gulf. They hadn't undeclared it since. And so, yeah, it's been a rough one for some of those guys. Especially I was in a desert warfare unit in the Marine Corps, so you can imagine those guys that stuck around and anyway. But that's the service connected. And there are some issues with that you need to know. For example, if you are a service-connected disabled veteran, one question that I often get is, if I die, will my spouse get any of these service-connected disability benefits? And the answer is maybe. There's two situations where the surviving spouse will continue to get a service-connected disability. If the veteran was at 100% service-connected disabled for 10 years prior to their death, then their spouse continues to get a benefit, and that benefit's called the DIC, or Dependency and Indemnity Compensation Benefit. Everybody just calls it the DIC. It's about half. It's about $1,300 to $1,500 a month. But again, you got to stay alive. You got to get to that 100% and then stay alive for 10 years. And so often, what gets you to the 10% is a life-limiting disease. And so often that doesn't work. The other way for the surviving spouse to get the DIC benefit is if the veteran dies of whatever gave them the service-connected disability in the first place. Right? So if I get blown up by an IED and I'm dead, my spouse would get the DIC benefit because I was killed on active duty. If I was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam and I died of a Agent Orange related disease like Parkinson's, then it's really, for military purposes, no different than having died in the jungle back in 1971 or whatever. So the problem you run into, though, take like that Parkinson's, right? If you had boots on the ground in Vietnam, there's about 14 listed diseases. And if you have one of those 14 listed diseases and you had boots on the ground in Vietnam, then those are presumptively connected. Agent Orange and your combat experience. And so if you have, Parkinson's is one of them. There's a whole list. You can find them on the internet. But for example, if you had Parkinson's and you were service-connected disabled now, Parkinson's is a degenerative disease. It's going to get worse, and you'll probably die from it. But here's what often happens, right? As the body weakens, you become susceptible to other things. And then you get the flu. And then the flu turns into fluid on the lungs. And your Parkinson's has limited your ability to fight off that illness. And as a result, you die of pneumonia. If they put on your death certificate, you died of pneumonia, then you didn't die of the illness that gave you the service-connected disability benefit. But if they put on that death certificate, died from pneumonia as a complication of Parkinson's, then it is a service-connected death. So oftentimes, just making sure that death certificate matches whatever that service-connected disability benefit is, that often can provide for that surviving spouse from that point forward. But it's all about, even if you don't have that, you can still possibly go back and prove it, but it's much easier if you've just got it right there stamped on the death certificate. So anyway, that's the service-connected. That's the main thing I wanted you to know about that. The one that we deal with the most often is a non-service-connected disability benefit. So it's a benefit for a veteran or spouse, and I'll talk about that in a second, that needs somebody else's help, that they're disabled. But their disability doesn't have anything to do with their military service. They just happen to have been military and now are disabled. They're just not, those things are not connected. And so in order to qualify for this category of benefit, there's a few basic things. First of all, the veteran had to have served on active duty for a minimum of 90 days, and one of those 90 days had to be during a designated period of war. That would be World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or, like in my case, any time from 1990 to present. Everybody in those categories, all of those would be wartime veterans. When I started this practice 15 years ago, I actually had lots and lots of World War II veterans that we were doing this for. Don't see very many of them anymore. Then we kind of got a wave, and we got quite a few Korea era, and still get some of those. We're starting to see the Vietnam eras coming in pretty regularly. But there are a couple of little holes in there. There's what I call the Cold War era. The people that joined the military after Korea, but got out before Vietnam started. In which case, you do not have a period of war. That doesn't count. And so they would not be eligible for this category. You got to have that one day. Now, we did have a World War II veteran here a while back who actually joined the Navy on the very last day of World War II. It counts. All I had to have one day during a period of war. As long as you got that one day, you're good. So you got to have the war period. You have to need, there has to be a medical reason why you might need this benefit. So I was given this similar speech down in Tyler a week or so ago, and there was a lady there, and she was like, well, I applied for this benefit, and they said I couldn't get it right now. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at you. You're fine. You drove yourself here. I think, in fact, we got to talk, and she even has a part-time job. Yeah, I mean, she was the widow of a wartime veteran and all of that, but she's too healthy. This is for people who need somebody else's help with their daily living. Somebody to help them, for example, feed themselves, bathe themselves, meal preparation, dressing, transferring, things like that. So this is for those kind of long-term care type expenses, where you're really needing a lot of assistance to get by on a day-to-day basis. So you got to have that health component. But beyond that, what it really, and of course, I mentioned that this also applies to the surviving spouse of a wartime veteran. In order to be the surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, you had to be married to the veteran for at least 1 year. Not while they were in the military, that doesn't matter. You just had to be married to them for 1 year, married to them at the time of their death, and not remarried. Unless you remarry another veteran, in which case you're back in. So, single ladies, choose wisely. We got guys coming back from Iraq right now. We'll get y'all some phone numbers. Anyway, you just had to be married to them for 1 year, married to them at the time of their death, and not remarried. If you do remarry, then that cancels out that prior one. So if you do remarry, even if that second spouse has died, it still doesn't go back to the first one. So if you remarry, you're out on this category. So anyway, that's the surviving spouse. But what it really boils down to is a two-part test. This is considered a need-based benefit. So where like the retirement benefit is based on your military time, the service-connected is based on your injuries, this benefit is based on your financial need. And the way the VA looks at it is if you don't financially need their help, then they're not going to give you their help. The main thing there is just to understand how that works, because they look at income and they look at assets. You just got to know how they look at those so you can know how to work yourself within the system. Anytime you're dealing with government, it's all about knowing how the rules work. If you know how the rules work, then you can work within their system. If you don't know how the rules work, then you might as well just be, climbing up a slippery wall because it's not going to do you anything. All right, so let's talk about the income. The VA says that you need to have low monthly income. There you go. The world does that mean? When VA says you're supposed to have low monthly income, it has absolutely nothing to do with how much your income is. Doesn't that? Yeah, now that sounds like government, doesn't it? Now, nothing to do with what your income is. The VA uses what they call income for VA purposes, or IVAP. And what that is how much you have left over after paying for the care you need based on your medical situation. So for example, if I have $2,000 a month in income, and even though I'm not well, I'm getting by on my own. So other than just the cost of my Medicare and my supplement, I'm not really spending any other money. Well, the VA would probably say I have too much income. On the other hand, let's say that I had $5,000 a month in income, but I was looking at moving into an assisted living or nursing home that was going to cost $5,200 a month. Well, if you subtract $5,200 from my $5,000, my income is negative $200. And so the VA would tell me, you do have low monthly income because I don't have anything left after I have spent on my care. All right? So it's not about how much you're bringing in, it's about how much you have left over after you're paying for your care. All right? And we see this often in two categories. One category is somebody who is looking at maybe moving into a different living environment. Lisa Schulmeyer's grandmother, after her husband died, she really couldn't maintain the big house that they had there in Shreveport. So she sold the house, and really, other than the money she had from the sale of that house, she didn't have a whole lot of savings, and the household income had basically gotten cut in half once the spouse died. So all she really felt like she could do was rent this dank little apartment there in Shreveport. And it was terrible. It was supposedly a senior apartment, but what kind of senior apartment has a step-in shower? Like that kind of deal, right? The kitchen was this wide. So I mean, if you had a walker, you'd have to like get up in it and go sideways. So I mean, so this place, now, was it cheap? Yeah. So she's got, say, $1,200 in Social Security, and this place is running, $600 a month or something, so she feels like I can afford that, still have plenty of money left over, blah, blah, blah. But it's dark, and it's just really terrible. And, as she aged, she, as many people do, she's got some mobility issues, she fall risk. And so she had fallen several times, a couple of times trying to get in and out of that stupid shower. And the last time, she fell in that little bitty kitchen while she was cooking. Fell on top of the open flame of the stove, burned her left breast, upper shoulder, and part of her face. Now, luckily, it wasn't anything that she couldn't heal from, but particularly anybody who knows that's injured themselves, the older you get, the longer it takes to heal. And so, obviously she needed a change. Meanwhile, there is a facility, frankly, just right up the street from where she's at, that's super nice. It's little single rooms. They provide meal preparation, although you have a little kitchenette in the room if you want to cook your own stuff. It's got a little kind of small living room, y'all know what I'm talking about, these kind of places. The problem was that place in her case, it was going to be about $2,200 a month. She's got $1,200 a month. She can't afford that without bleeding her savings, and she's afraid that if she starts bleeding the savings, she'll bleed out, and there won't be any savings. She was the widow of a World War II veteran. So we applied, we got her some extra money. In her case, the maximum, for the widow of a veteran, the maximum benefit is about $1,200 a month. And the VA awarded her the entire $1,200 a month. That turned her $1,200 in income into $2,400 in income. And now she can afford to pay for that facility. She's been there for several years now. She has not even had to touch her savings for her day-to-day living. She's the captain of the Beanbag Baseball League, which is surprising because she's just about blind at this point, and she's still nailing those shots. Anyway. But yeah, so again, in her case, with the income, it wasn't about how much income she had. When she was living in that little apartment, she wasn't paying for anything. But the cost of that facility, now that they're providing assistance, the cost of that facility is deducted from her income. And if you deduct $2,200 from $1,200, it's a big fat zero. And so the VA says, well, yeah, you don't have any income, so you need all that we can give you, which in a widow's case is about $1,200 a month. For a single veteran, that benefits about $1,800 a month. And if you have a veteran with a spouse, it maxes out at about $2,200 a month. And so that can go a long way towards either stopping the bleeding of any savings or slowing it down to a trickle. So anyway, so that's the income side of it. Then there's the asset side of it. The asset side of it is actually a little simpler. A year ago, if we were having this conversation, I would have told you that the VA's rule was that you have to have a normal net worth. Yep, normal. That's what they said. No definition, no nothing, normal. October 15th of last year, so almost a year to date, the VA changed that rule and said that normal net worth means house, car, personal property, and everything else you have is less than $126,300. They just, bam, that's it. So that is now their definition of normal net worth. House, car, personal property, and $126,300. That number gets adjusted every year for inflation, so it goes up a little bit at a time. But they just set a bright line rule. Now that they had set a bright line rule, they knew that there were going to be some people that were over that. That have a house, a car, and say $200,000. And they didn't want those folks to just turn around and give it away. And so the VA, for the first time, imposed a penalty on transferring assets, giving away stuff. The same kind of rule that you would see with Medicaid. If you're applying for Medicaid, Medicaid says that if you have given away any of your assets within 5 years, they will not pay for you for at least a period of time. That's Medicaid. VA came up with something similar, and they said if you have given away any of your assets within the last 3 years, there will be a period of time where they will not pay for you. So if I've got somebody that's got a house, a car, and $200,000, and they're looking at this VA benefit right now, we don't have the option of just giving that away. Doesn't work. The VA would penalize us now. And the way they penalize it is for every $2,200 that you give away, that's 1 month of VA benefit they will not send you. So all of a sudden, for a lot of people, if you're below those kind of limits, no big deal. If you're above those limits, This VA benefit has turned into something that you now have to pre-plan for. 2 or 3 years ago, I would have people come in. They would say, hey, I've got a house, I got a car, I got $300,000 in assets, I'm moving into assisted living, I would like to get this VA benefit. And I would say, look, VA doesn't tell us what a normal net worth is, but I know it ain't $300,000. So let's try to get you down to, $50,000 or $80,000 by taking $250 of that and throwing it in a trust where it won't count for VA purposes. And then as soon as we get that in the trust, we turn around and apply for VA benefits, and 2 or 3 months later, the money's coming in. Can't do that anymore. Now, that's something that would have had to have been done 3 years in advance, or else there would be a period of time where VA would not pay for it. So they have turned this into a pre-planning tool. That being said, I visited with a lady just a couple of weeks ago. Her husband is in the nursing home right now. They're paying about $4,500, $4,800 a month for his care. He is a World War II veteran, and so they were coming to me about this particular benefit. They've got enough money that it puts them over the limit, and then on top of that, in addition to their home, they've got 400 or 500 acres of property that also would definitely put them over that limit. Because again, the house doesn't count, but land does. And one of the other changes the VA made when they did this new change is they said the house doesn't count, but when we say house, we mean the house and the 2 acres that the house is sitting on. Well, that makes a lot of sense in New York. That'd make a hill of beans worth of sense in Hempstead County, where everybody's house sits on more than 2 acres. My house sits on more than 2 acres. My house sits on 2.5 acres. So does that mean I got 0.5 that counts in that? It doesn't make any sense. But that's what the VA rule is. And the thing that really, if you get me on a soapbox, you could have a 2-bedroom condo in New York City, and that thing is probably worth $1.5 million. Or you could have an $80,000 house sitting on 100 acres in Bowie County, Texas. The whole 100 acres worth, $2,000 an acre? So that's $200,000? That counts against you. So $2 million house in New York doesn't count because it's not on 2 acres. $80,000 house in Bowie County that's sitting on 200 acres or 100 acres does count. Doesn't make any sense. It's basically is people in places like Washington, D.C. Making rules that have nothing to do with middle America. Makes me mad as a hornet, but ain't nothing I can do about it. They made the rules. But that does go to show you that, if you've got somebody, if you're thinking, you know what? John just said I can have a house and I can have up to $126,000, and I got my house sitting on 100 acres. Now you may have a problem, even if you don't have any cash. You had a question?
Can you take your house and place it on 2 acres and then separate the other portion of the land and put it in a trust?
Your question is could you maybe either put the other land in a trust or something like that? Yes, but that would still be subject to the 3-year transfer penalty. So it kind of goes back to you have to know these rules to know whether or not you have to plan ahead of time or whether you can just wait until the time comes. If somebody's sitting there on 200 acres, they probably do need to shield that land with a trust so that they could qualify for that benefit in a few years from now. Because if they just sit around and do nothing, then that other land is likely going to count against them and keep them from qualifying. And the thing about dirt is you can't really sell it, not quickly, and you don't want to in the first place, especially around here. A lot of times that dirt's been in the family since 1850. And so the last thing you want to do is have to sell it so that you can, get some extra money to pay for your care. So anyway, so you can have the house on 2 acres, you can have the car, you can have $126,300. Because they've made this a bright line rule, it really does amount to some pre-planning on this part. But I was mentioning this lady. So this lady's husband's in the nursing home. They're spending $4,500 a month. They've got the house. They've got all this land. They got some money as well. And they were coming in to see about getting some VA benefits. Well, first of all, there's really nothing I could do for the VA right now. And I think this gentleman's 96 and not terribly healthy. So, really a plan that's going to take effect in 3 years ain't going to do us much good either. But they were coming in about him. I dismissed that right off the bat. I was like, yeah, no, I think you're pretty much just going to have to pay for him. Luckily, if you want to use that word luckily, with his life expectancy, you probably won't be spending all that much. But my focus immediately turned around, though, to the surviving spouse, right? I've got the wife who's coming in about this. And I'm like, yeah, but you are still healthy. You are still living independently. You now see that this is a problem for your husband. It would be the same problem for you. So even though this is not going to do any good for him, let's get some of these assets wrapped up where we can shield them. And that way, in a couple of years, if your health goes down, you will be able to get these sort of benefits. So, again, you kind of got to pre-plan on all of this. Does that all make pretty good sense? All right. The easiest thing to think about the VA benefit is that it's a great benefit if you have some costs. Right? For Lisa's grandmother, getting that extra $1,200 a month means she can pay for that, $2,200 place that she's living in right now. If she falls and she needs something like nursing home care, well, that's going to run about $160 a day. That's $5,000 a month. And even that extra money coming from the VA is not going to do much. It'll slow the bleeding of the savings a little bit, but it's not going to do much to stop it at that point. Even with that extra VA money, she would be burning $3,000 a month on her savings. And that's just not going to last for very long. So, I have a lot of folks that come in, they hear a speech like this, they come in and they say, well, we want to talk about the VA benefit, and I'm looking at it going, we might could get it, but frankly, it's not going to do all that much. We should have been having this conversation when you were hiring somebody to come in 3 days a week, and you were spending, $400 a week to pay for somebody to come in the house. Yeah, at $1,600 a month, that made pretty good sense. Now that person has fallen and they're at the nursing home and it's $5,000, we probably need to switch our focus to something like Medicaid. Medicaid being the only government program that pays for any of that stuff. Medicaid is much more strict, though, where VA will let you have $126,000. If you're single, Medicaid will let you have $2,000. That's broke. And particularly when you get into somebody that's got real estate, I run into people all the time of what we call land rich and cash poor. I had one guy a couple of years ago, and I don't even know how he managed to afford it all, but he had about $5 million worth of real estate and 20 grand to his name in cash. And basically, one big chunk of property, some farmer cut the hay off of it, and the money from the hay that he got was enough to pay the taxes. And another piece of property, it was actually a post office in a little small town in East Texas. And the federal government basically paid him enough rent for the post office that it paid the taxes. And so he's just all $5 million worth of real estate, and it's just all break even. And so he's got no cash. He has a stroke. He goes to a nursing home at $5,000 a month. He burns through the $25,000 in just a couple of months. Well, he's not going to qualify for Medicaid with $5 million worth of real estate. But, most of that property was not easily sold or anything, so you can easily run into a problem where you can't qualify for the benefit that you need because of something like real estate, but you can't pay for it either because you don't have any money. And so that can be a dangerous situation. So I guess my point with kind of focusing on the VA benefit here is don't get so focused on that VA benefit that's all you're thinking about. If, for example, if I had somebody that was coming in and they said, hey, John, we're thinking about maybe needing this VA benefit down the road, and we've got this land and we've got this money here, and you said that we got to be below 126,000, so we want to create this trust and get ourselves below 126,000. That's great until you need Medicaid, and now you got 126,000 that's going to go to the facility before you ever qualify for Medicaid. Might have made more sense to get even more shielded. So pre-planning, figuring out where you're at. Like I said, the VA benefit used to be a great tool that we could get in an emergency. Somebody had an immediate health crisis. Even if we couldn't get them on Medicaid, we could at least get that VA benefit right now. We cannot do it anymore. It is a pre-planning deal unless you're already under those limits. So you definitely want to know where you fit in all of that. Any questions about any of this stuff? I'm just explaining it that well, huh? Go ahead.
All right, of course, in my second marriage, we married when we were 15, 16. We've got his, hers, theirs, as far as the bank account, what counts and what.
So your question is, second marriage, and you got stuff, he's got stuff, y'all got stuff. And so your question is, what would count in all of this? And you might even have the kids on some of these accounts and things like that. So what would count in all of this? Generally, everything that a married couple has is going to count when you're looking at government benefits. Whether you're talking about VA or Medicaid, they do not see his and hers. They only see y'all's. Now, interestingly enough, with the VA, if you have a joint owner on a bank account like a child, even if the child has not contributed any funds to that account, the VA will typically split that and say that half of that belongs to the veteran and their spouse, and the other half of it belongs to the child, even though the child never actually put any money in there. So, for example, if somebody came in and they had $200,000 in their savings account that was in their name and their two kids' names, they'd probably actually be $100,000 for VA purposes, because we could make the argument with the VA that half of it belonged to the kids because they're owners on the account. That does not work for Medicaid purposes. For Medicaid purposes, they don't care if your name is anywhere close to touching it. Yours, spouses, I don't care how many kids you got on the account, none of that matters. It's all y'all's. That's the legal term, y'all's. It's all y'all's. And so, yeah, I have this conversation all the time. I've got somebody in the office and their husband's in at the nursing home and trying to figure out what to do. And so I'm going through what's their income, what are their assets? Do you own any real estate? Well, yeah, we have a house. Okay, you own any other real estate? No. Okay, IRAs, whatever. And then I'll get on my computer and I'll look up the tax rolls, to see what the value on the house is, and there's 2 entries. And I'm like, well, here's the house, but what's this 40 acres? And the wife will say, well, that's not his. That came from my daddy. No, y'all's. What part of y'all's didn't y'all understand? It don't matter. And I've even had them come back and say, oh yeah, that's okay, John. We have a prenup. Don't care. Y'all's. Medicaid doesn't care about none of that. If either spouse name's attached to it, they're going to count it. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so your question is, what about life insurance? The cash value of a life insurance policy is an asset. Not the death benefit, but the cash value. I was visiting with one of my longtime clients yesterday, and she has a term life insurance policy. Death benefit's $500,000. But it's term life, it has no cash value. If she doesn't make a payment, that thing goes away and ain't nothing for nobody. That would not count against her if she needed VA benefits. And she's an English lady, and as so many English ladies her age, she was brought back from England, somewhere around 1945. So that's how she got to the United States, and she's the widow of a World War II veteran. So that term life insurance wouldn't have anything to do with her. On the other hand, the one thing what we see more often are what they call permanent life, whole life, things like that, where every time you make a premium, part of it goes toward the insurance, but part of it builds up in there. And you could take a loan against that, or if you canceled the policy, you could get that money back out. That cash value is what that's called. That counts for both VA and Medicaid purposes. I can't tell you how many times we have done a VA application or a Medicaid application for somebody where we thought we had covered everything. We thought they were down below $2,000. We sent all of that to Medicaid, and Medicaid comes back and says, what about this life insurance policy? And we'll often ask the kids, we're like, what about this life insurance policy? And they're like, what life insurance policy? And sure enough, it's Medicaid that finds it. They get us the information. We then turn around and have to go get it from the insurance company, only to find out that there's $4,000 worth of cash value in this $5,000 life insurance policy. But of course, that's more than $2,000, so they're disqualified. So that was a long answer to your relatively simple question, but yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I know there's probably people that have the same question, but what if you don't have your DD 214?
Oh, yeah. So the key to unlocking the door of the VA is the DD 214, the military discharge paperwork. Since Korea and forward, and to modern times, they use the DD, that's the form number, Form DD 214. Usually at the top of it, it says something like, discharge, and then it's got all these little blocks in it. Name, address, where the person enlisted, when they enlisted, how long they were on active duty, how long they had reserve time, any medals or awards that they received, all of that. And that little magic piece of paper is what gets you into the VA. Now, prior to Korea, they actually, they didn't use the form number DD 214. They didn't start using that till into Korea and beyond. But so in World War II, they called it a certificate of discharge. But it's the same thing, generally speaking. You have to have this thing. And lots of people do not have it. It's gotten lost over the years. If you can't come up with the DD 214, you could attempt to get a certified copy from the National Archives. If you go to, if you're on the internet much, you can go to archives.gov/veterans, and if you type in that website, comes up with a little block and it says, order DD 214. And you fill in the information and hit submit, and sometime in about 4 to 6 weeks, you will hear back from the VA, and they'll say, here's your copy. I did it a while back. I needed a copy of my entire military record, all of my medical records, my discharge, my services and awards, all of that stuff. And so I got on archives.gov/veterans, put my information in, and a couple of weeks later, I got a compact disc in the mail that had copies of everything on it. Luckily for me, I joined the military after 1979. And I say that because in 1979, the VA records facility in St. Louis, Missouri burned to the ground. And it took 4 million veterans' records with it. In many cases, the only records. There is a huge category of folks that the only proof of their military service is the one they have in their possession. And unfortunately, you go into the military when you're 17 or 18 or 19 or something like that, and you're stupid. I have 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, and they're stupid. And you get out of the military at 22, 23, 24, and you're still stupid. You're slightly less stupid, but still pretty stupid. You're on the road to not stupid, hopefully. If you're not, you're in trouble. But in any case, you're still dumb and you're young, and things like keeping up with paperwork are not high priorities. Going out with your friends, finding you a job, looking for the next love of your life. Those are priorities. Keeping intricate file records with all of your important paperwork are not priorities. And so often those records have been lost over the years. If you fill out that stuff online, you'll typically get one of 3 letters. You'll get a letter from the VA that says, here's the DD-214, you're good. Second one, you'll get a letter that says, here is a letter. We've looked for the DD-214. Can't find it. Probably burned up in the fire. But we found enough evidence to be able to certify your military service. And this letter will act as your key to unlocking the VA, in which case you're still good. Or you get the third letter that says you were never in the military. Or at least we have no proof of it, in which case you're in trouble. There are several ways that you might try to prove your military service, but you will end up sinking in a bureaucratic quagmire and never get out. So it's virtually impossible. So look for it. If you can't find it, here's a couple of little pointers. When I got out of the military, they did a little, separation with all the guys that are getting out. They got to say, hey, you're getting out of the military, don't do something stupid when you get home. Try to get a job. And of course, the one thing I remember is they were like, also remember, if you ever get arrested, from here on out, the newspaper headline is going to say, former U.S. Marine, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter what you do. But if you do something really dumb and get arrested, it's not going to be John Ross did something stupid. It's going to be former U.S. Marine John Ross did something stupid. And so they were like, just consider that, But one of the things they also said was, when you get home, take that DD-214 immediately to your county clerk and record it. Because when you lose it, which you will because you're stupid, you could always go back to that county clerk's office and get a certified copy. And that certified copy will work for the VA. And so I mentioned Lisa's grandmother. Of course, by the point we were looking at the VA benefits, her grandfather had passed. She had sold the house. And of course, you sell a house, you're moving stuff around. Anyway, one thing or another, we could not find his DD-214. We got on archives.gov, filled out all the paperwork, and they came back with, we got no record. So we figured we were probably out of luck. In talking to Lisa's grandmother, I was like, well, where, did y'all live in, have y'all lived in Shreveport all this time? She's like, well, for a long time. So we called Caddo Parish clerk's office. They didn't have nothing. I was like, well, where did he get out? When he got out of the Navy, where was he? And she was like, oh, he was in Florida. I was like, so just on a whim, I called the county clerk's office in Jacksonville, Florida, and sure enough, they had a copy where he had recorded it. So they've been telling dumb, young military personnel to go record that DD-214 at the county clerk's office as soon as you get off the boat or wherever it is, since 1940s. So that's often, if you can't find one, you may get lucky with a county clerk's office where somebody was smart enough to record it. I still have mine, but I have lost it several times and then refound it. I always seem to lose it when I need it, and then I have it when I don't need it. So every time I need it for something, I can't find it, and I usually end up calling Hays County, Texas, because that's my home base when I got out of the military, and I call Hays County and have them send me a certified copy so that I can, carry it to the Home Depot so I can get my 10% or whatever. I'm not opposed to taking me a deal. The last time I did it, it was to get the veteran card. You can now get a VA card that identifies you as a veteran, so you don't have to carry your DD-214 around if you want your 10% at Home Depot, or if you want your free donut at Dunkin' or whatever it is. What's that?
The driver's license.
Yeah, and in Texas, it's you can actually, if you have your DD-214. The last time I registered got my driver's license, I gave them my DD-214. So now my Texas driver's license has veteran on it. My concealed handgun license has veteran on it. But yeah, you got to have that DD-214. Yes, you have to have their birth certificate and. Yeah, and yeah, in fact, as far as the driver's license, you mentioned having to carry up your birth certificate and all of that. There is a law that goes into effect maybe at the end of the year, and it relates to your driver's license. And so pull out your driver's license at some point and see if it's got a gold star up in the right-hand corner. And if it does, you're good. But if it doesn't, and you try to fly somewhere, that ID is not going to get you on a plane. You have to go back and carry your birth certificate and everything back up to the DMV, and they have to authenticate your existence. And so you get the little gold star on your. Well, that's neither here nor there, but that just brought that up. That's a relatively new thing that is going into effect, and that applies to everybody. Yeah, you can't get a passport. You can't. You're going to have that on there. You can't go into a federal building either. Yeah, federal buildings, any place that's going to require an ID, your regular ID will not work unless it's got that on there. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
They give me this card here when I got discharged from the Air Force, and a lot of times they won't accept it, even though I've got the 214.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients that have something like this, a little wallet-sized certificate of discharge, got the proof of active duty on the back of it, and I've got clients that have those, and some of them have laminated them, and they keep them in their wallet and things like that. That generally won't get you anywhere. It's a kind of a nice little thing to have, but.
It says a lot of things that's on the 214.
Yeah, oh, it says exactly what you would need for VA benefits or anything else. But yeah, generally the VA would not accept it, and many other places won't either. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that a fellow can serve 4 honorable years in the military? If it's not during wartime, they're not entitled to any VA benefits?
So yeah, so your question is, if you did 4 years active duty, discharged honorably, the whole works, but it was not during a period of war, then this benefit that I just talked about would be unavailable to you. You have to have that 1 day of active duty during a war period. Yeah, I mean, and you know, it really kind of isn't because, you know, I mean, if you enlisted, I've got a client right now, and he's from Baton Rouge. He lives in Baton Rouge right now, but he was a 16, 15-year-old kid on the day they bombed Pearl Harbor. And he said he was playing with his little friends out in the street, and somebody came running by, and they say they bombed Pearl Harbor. And he and his friends looked at each other and said, "What's a Pearl Harbor?" And of course, his home that he lived in, they didn't even have electricity. So the little gaggle of kids all ran down the street and to somebody that had a radio, and they listened to the whole deal. That Monday after, he walked into the Navy recruiting office at 15 years old and said, "Sign me up." And they said, "How old are you, kid?" And he said, "I'm 15. And they said, "Go outside, have 2 birthdays, and come back in." And so this now 17-year-old, 15-year-old kid, he had his 16th birthday in boot camp, was then transferred to Pearl Harbor. Once he got to Pearl Harbor, do you remember the name of the ship that he was on? God, it slipped my mind. But anyway, so they immediately put him on a ship. That ship went straight out of Pearl Harbor to Guadalcanal. They were sitting out in the open ocean after having some sea battles close to Guadalcanal when they saw the Japanese submarine chunk 3 torpedoes. He said it was 2 o'clock in the morning. He was looking out, and all of a sudden you can see 3 torpedoes coming. There wasn't nothing they can do. He was at the top of the ship when the 3 torpedoes all impacted at once. He swam out of the ship as it was sinking, and then spent the next 3 days floating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. About 3 days later, another U.S. ship came by, and there were several other survivors around. Those guys started climbing up the rigging on the side when they got another attack warning, and that ship went full throttle. And so he was hanging on the rigging on the side as that ship pulled away, leaving the rest of the guys still floating. Most of them died, but there was a very small group of them that managed to pick up some little chunks of debris. They, over the course of another 2 days, floated to an island that was occupied by the Japanese. But there was an indigenous tribe there, and the indigenous tribe hid those guys from the Japanese occupying force until after the war was over. Anyway, this guy, he got rescued. He got sent back to Pearl Harbor, did a couple of weeks in the brig. And I asked him about that, and he said, "Look, I figured I was going to die one way or the other, so I was going to live a little bit." Anyway, so he got out of the brig. They stuck him on another ship where he went straight to Iwo Jima. He was driving the landing crafts, shuttling the Marines to the shores of Iwo Jima. when one of them was hit by a kamikaze and sunk. At least in this case, he was able to swim back to the ship. Got back on that ship, apparently punched an officer, got thrown in the ship's brig, and then released from the brig once that ship got to Okinawa. Anyway, fantastic story. All of that story to say, you know, that guy who joined in the middle of that nightmare, hey, give him whatever he wants. But, you know, for everybody else that joins, you don't know. You don't know what could happen. And so it may be peacetime, but the fact that you've put your butt on the line, even during that peacetime, you know full well that at any day, it turns into that nightmare. And so I kind of agree with you. You know, why limit it to, I mean, like in my case, I joined after the first Gulf, but before the second one started. So I was in that kind of middle there. There was not a war going on. They just had not officially undeclared it yet. So, you know, same sort of deal. Anyway, but I agree with you. Anything else? Last one. All right, well, but two more. Go ahead.
The 126,000 you're talking about, is that total assets or cash assets?
Yeah, so the 126,000 on this VA benefit, your question is that total assets or is that just like cash? It's total. So if you've got other land and a rent house and some money in an IRA and 2 CDs at the bank, add all of that stuff up, and does it equal more than 126,000? Yes, sir.
If I understand you correct, you said you were certified VA lawyer.
Yes.
Does the VA have an account there where we can draw on to pay you to meet your service?
Yeah, so a couple of questions on that. So he mentioned that we're certified VA attorneys, and then he was the other question was, is there a way to get the VA to pay for our services? 2 things on that. One, no. I wish they did. That'd be great. Although I will say one thing I'm glad I don't have to worry about is billing government agencies. Ask any doctor how they feel about that. But the other thing is a lot of what we do, we actually do not charge for. So for example, if you came in and you sat down with me or Lori or Ben or somebody like that, and you had $1,500 worth of income, you're looking at assisted living that costs $3,000, you got a house and $50,000, you qualify for the VA benefit, we would do your application for free. If you were coming in and saying, hey, I might need this VA benefit, but I've got, more money, extra land, rental properties, things like that, and we were going to create a trust or something like that on your behalf, we would charge for that service. A couple of years down the road, you need VA benefits, we would help you with that application for free. So there's certain things within the VA that we just do not charge for. It's the legal stuff that goes along with it that we typically do. All right? Well, listen, I appreciate y'all letting me run my mouth. I'll hang around if anybody's got any questions. Otherwise, y'all have a good one.